Freeman.
Well, thank you, Mr. Paisley. It's a great pleasure to have this opportunity to serve under your chairmanship today in the absence of my right honourable friend, the Climate Minister, who is dealing with these very issues at COP27 today. Could I just start by congratulating the honourable member for North Shropshire? She's a very exciting new Member of Parliament, and I think she's done well today to bring this issue to the attention of the House. I have to say that in the story of parliamentary horses bolting, Mr. Paisley, I'm delighted to say, as someone who was as concerned as everyone here, that the very short-lived administration in September flirted with the idea of lifting the 2019 moratorium, Conservative moratorium on fracking, that has been reversed very clearly by the Prime Minister. So I think to say this horse has bolted is to liken Shergar to a beach pony. This is well and truly put to bed, and it gives me great pleasure to be able today to, I'll deal with the points that honourable members have made, but to make very clear that this Prime Minister and the Cabinet and the Secretary of State and the Climate Change Minister, in fact this whole government, has returned to our position in the 2019 manifesto, which was an effective moratorium on fracking, and furthermore, that ministers are taking a presumption, which may go some way to answer the point the honourable member opposite made. Ministers are taking a presumption against issuing any further hydraulic fracking consents. So I accept that there was a period for a month or two where all sorts of horses were running wild around the beach, but the position is absolutely clear. And for those listening and the 18,000 people who signed this petition, let me be very clear, this government is not about to open up the UK fracking market, and we are back to the position that we set out in 2019. Could I equally thank, Mr. Paisley, those who have spoken today, the honourable member for Strangford. Obviously, it's a great pleasure to see him here. I know I'm in the right room when I see the honourable member here, assiduous as ever, the honourable member for East Londonderry, the honourable member for Bath, and the honourable member, obviously, for Bristol East. Let me just then deal with the points that have been made, Mr. Paisley, and in particular the sort of broader context in which this issue is being discussed and in which we need to view it. I'll just say something about the energy supply market and then something about gas and something about local consent, because I think members have raised some important points about the role and the mechanisms of local consent in these sectors, not just in relation to gas, actually, but in relation to all critical national infrastructure and other renewables. Let me just start then by setting the scene that as someone who's been in this House for 12 years and been watching this House for about 30, I think it's fair to say, I can see colleagues around the House who feel the same way, that actually we've taken as a government, as a country, for decades, we've rather taken energy for granted until about 15 years ago. We presumed it was something that would always be there very cheaply at the flick of a switch, and we didn't have to worry too much about energy, and that position has rather belatedly, but I think dramatically changed in the last 15 years, and I pay tribute actually to the last climate change minister in the Labour government before 2010, who started a profound acceleration of our leadership on net zero, and I'm proud that the Conservative Liberal Democrat coalition in 2010-15 and then the Conservative government has taken that forward, and I think we've come on in leaps and bounds in terms of our leadership on net zero. I think it bears repeating the scale of that success, that since 1990, we've managed to grow the economy by 70-odd%, 40-odd%, and we've grown the net zero sector by 70-odd%. We have managed to demonstrate that it is possible to have green growth, and I mean, extraordinary progress. I accept, I think everyone does, that we were, as a country, late to this, but if you look back, low-carbon electricity now gives us around half of all our total generation. We've installed 99% of our solar capacity since 2010. The onshore wind industry actually is already generating over 14 gigawatts of onshore wind, and quite happily now accepted around the country. Onshore wind is cheap, and we put 30 billion of domestic investment for the green industrial revolution. I think these are figures that even 15 years ago one might have been quite surprised to see. This country is genuinely leading in making the big transitional investments to move to net zero. But of course, this year and in the last 18 months, the pandemic and the appalling situation in Ukraine has triggered a cost of living and particularly cost of energy crisis globally, and reminded us of the importance of having resilient supply chains and making sure that we're not vulnerable to hostile actors internationally or hostile or vulnerable to supply chains in which we can be held ransom. Mr. Happily give way.
Since he talks about the UK's leadership in renewables, which is positive, shouldn't there be a government ambition to be an exporter of renewable energy, since we have so many opportunities, and sort of really share that with the European continent and interconnectors? Isn't that a brilliant opportunity when we are talking about the global Britain and its leadership with renewables?
Mr. Freeman.
Yes, she makes an excellent point, and indeed that's why the former Prime Minister used to refer to the southern North Sea as the Saudi Arabia of wind energy, and that is precisely our ambition. Of course, first we need to make sure we can meet our own domestic energy market needs. But crucially, she makes the point actually for me very well, that we're in a global market, and actually global energy demand over the next 20, 30, 40 years will rise. And it isn't just a question of moving our existing energy demands to renewable supplies, vital though that is. It's also about developing the renewables for the future and contributing globally. And I'll take the question in a moment, but I would just make the point that as Minister for Science, Research, Technology and Innovation, we are investing heavily in small nuclear, in fusion, in marine, in geothermal, because we see a huge opportunity for the UK to be in the vanguard of the renewables and the clean energies of tomorrow.
Jim Shannon.
I thank the Minister for his very detailed and helpful and comprehensive response. Minister, I read in the paper, I think over the weekend, because it shows some of the innovation there is across the world where we can interact with others. For instance, Morocco, I understand, have an abundance of green energy, and if the press is correct, that there are discussions undertaken between the United Kingdom government and the Moroccan government to ensure that there could be an exporting of those green energies from Morocco to the United Kingdom by the method of an undersea channel. Is the Minister aware of that? And if he is, then perhaps he can maybe elaborate upon it, please.
Minister. Well, the Honourable Member has made a very important point for the record. I won't attempt to answer it because I'm not the Energy and Climate Change Minister, but I will flag it with him and ask that he gets a proper answer. But the point I was trying to make really is that as well as our groundbreaking leadership in the transition of our existing energy system to net zero supply, we're also investing heavily in the technologies of tomorrow to make sure we can be a global player in the great global challenges that we face. And if one thinks, Mr. Paisley, in that agriculture and transport, the two big industries now after energy that are the maximum generators and users of carbon emissions and of greenhouse gases, those two sectors are sectors in which we are hugely advanced in terms of our R&D, and I say that as the former Minister for the Future Transport and the former Minister for Agri-Tech. This country has a huge opportunity as part of the Science Superpower mission to generate those solutions that we can export around the world, and I'm proud of what we're doing in that. But let me just come to in that context, I think it is right, and I think our customers, as it were, the constituents who we serve, the taxpayers, the households, businesses, people of this country, I think would expect any responsible government, given the crisis in Ukraine and the extraordinary pressures, huge pressures on everybody this year in terms of paying their energy bills, and obviously the government's made a huge commitment to cap that and to support it. But I think they would expect any responsible government to look at whether, if there are easily accessible and quickly accessible supplies of clean gas in the UK that can be extracted in a sensible and environmentally satisfactory way, I think they would look and think it was daft and weird if we weren't prepared to even look at it in that context. But let me be very clear, that cannot in any situation be against our own environmental commitments, against the environmental advice that we've received, or, crucially, against local consent. And others here have made the point that the British Geological Survey has made crystal clear there is no evidence to suggest that fracking can be pursued in any way that would pass that test. So, again, I'm delighted to repeat how pleased I personally am that the Prime Minister, the Cabinet, the Government have made clear that we are back to our 2019 effective moratorium. I just wanted to turn to the point about local consent, because I think that is... Yes, I'll happily give way.
Given that the Government is happy to express its commitment to stop fracking, would it be willing to put that into legislation so that we don't always have this shadow of doubt hanging over us, that it might at some point raise its ugly head again?
Minister? Well, I hear the Honourable Member. She's made a point and put it on the record. I slightly averse to the idea that we put on into legislation every single thing that we're not going to do. We'd be here an awful long time reassuring everyone. I'm not sure that is a sustainable way for Parliament to proceed. And I think the Prime Minister has made very clear the written ministerial statement to the House, and I think the sector, the community generally have understood that that idea mooted in September is dead and buried, and we're not going back there. I just want to pick up the point about, Mr Paisley, consent, because a number of colleagues have made it, and I think it is important. I mean, obviously, there's very little I can say about particular pockets of local consent in particular areas. I would just say that with regard to the North Shropshire issue that I know the Honourable Member has partly brought this debate in response to, that the licence for fracking that would potentially impact Market Drayton and Whitchurch and that area is actually simply it's an indicative licence. The conditions of actual, I mean, no work has been done, nothing has been started, no application for work has been received, and ministers would, in light of the announcement of the return to the 2019 position and the moratorium, I think it's quite difficult to envisage any situation in which that licence could be of any use. But I just wanted to reassure her that we're not expecting any activity in that area. Just on local consent more generally, I think we all recognise, certainly the government recognises, that community support, generally in our planning system, we want planning to be something done by and through and with local communities, not to them. There always is required to be some sort of balance, and obviously there's a huge difference between a loft extension and the siting of a huge piece of critical national infrastructure. But a really good developer will always engage, should always engage closely with the local community, listen to real concerns. I think many of us have constituents. I've certainly seen consultations in my area where concerns have been expressed, they haven't been listened to, they never reflected in the proposals, there's no change to anything that was ever promoted, and I think that that drives often a view of sham consultations in which people aren't really being heard. We need to be wary of assuming a one-size-fits-all approach would work for local support, and I think difficult though it is to see how this would take off. I mean, I think we've left open the possibility that if an area, north or south, southwest or in Scotland or Northern Ireland, found itself sitting on a very easily and geologically stable opportunity to exploit shale gas and came to the government with very strong local consent and very strong environmental data and very strong business case and environmental case, then government would consider it. But that's very different from us setting forward an ambition and encouraging this industry around the country. I would just say that in my own experience, in my constituency, we are home to the first two major substations connecting the first two offshore wind farms in the southern North Sea. And as the local constituency MP, I watched as the scheme promoter came forward with a proposal for a substation, Mr Paisley, which I thought at the time, naively, 10 years ago, was a sort of thing the size of a shipping container that hums behind a yew-bush. This thing is the size of Wembley Stadium. And it was proposed to put it on the top of a hill so that the whole of Norfolk could see this huge industrial piece of development. And through decent consultation, actually, with the company, we've ended up siting it. I wasn't against hosting it in mid-Norfolk, but we've put it down in low-lying ground, out of sight, so minimal light and visual impact. And for our thanks, we've had another one. We now have two of these next to each other in mid-Norfolk. And the point I'd make is it's critical infrastructure. I have to say, if we were connecting up all the wind farms offshore better, we could reduce the need for having individual substations and cabling all across the Norfolk and Suffolk coast, which I know my honourable friend the Minister is looking into, because it supports the infrastructure for trading out of the southern North Sea. But I have seen firsthand how often communities are not properly consulted, and without in any way opening up, as honourable members have, the risk of community benefit, creating an opportunity for some sort of inappropriate payments to buy consent. I think it is really important that when a village is hosting two vast pieces of national infrastructure, that it might get a park bench or some swings or something from the developer who are making a huge amount of money. And I would just put down, I think there's a difficult balance, but I think all of us in this chamber know it when we see it. We know good consent, we know good consultation, we know when a company is listening, and we know when a community has been properly heard. And I don't think that has been the case often enough, and I'm delighted to have the chance to put that on record. Yes, happy to give way.
Minister for giving way and for engaging so much in this debate. I think there are question marks about where the government is going with planning, and I think investment zones are being dropped, but I'm not quite sure where we are in terms of fast-tracking things and bypassing that sort of planning permission and local consent, but I'll leave that to another day. What I wanted to ask him, when he spoke about fracking and said that hypothetical situation where it was proven to be safe, the local community wanted it, etc., etc., I understand that. Why isn't that then the case for onshore wind? If there's a local community that would benefit from having onshore wind, why aren't they allowed to have it?
Well, I don't want to steal the thunder of my ministerial colleague, the Minister for Climate Change and Energy in the Department, who's looking at this issue right now. And again, we do need to get the balance right between productive farmland. This country, the pandemic and the war in Ukraine has revealed that we're also exposed on a number of our food and agricultural supply chains. We've got to get the balance right between covering all of far too much of our agricultural land, but equally making sure that where communities can carry it, and the industrial sites particularly, we've got the right incentives in place. And I know my honourable friend, the Minister, is looking into that right now.
And most helpful for giving way. We've had a number of debates in this hall, Mr Paisley, to do with this very issue, and the key issue from others who have spoken on this is that key agricultural land needs to be retained for the food production, and all the more so because of the crisis across the world when it comes to food supply and the Ukraine war. I think there's been a consensus, with great respect, that highly productive agricultural land needs to be retained for that purpose and that purpose alone.
Minister.
Well, the honourable member makes a really important point, one that I personally agree with and the government is very sensitive to. It would be, I think, again, our constituents would think it perverse if at the very time when our exposure to international food supply and agricultural supply chains has been exacerbated by the war in Ukraine and the pandemic, if we were then to decide to take out of productive capacity huge areas of agricultural land. Agriculture is a great British industry, and the agri-tech sector is developing those net zero technologies that allow us to do clean green agriculture, and we don't want to be undermining that industry.
I thank the Minister for giving way. He's very generous. Isn't it time that we are busting some urban myth about solar panels and where they go? Very often, most of the time, they go on land which is not suitable for other agricultural uses, but they're used for example, grazing sheep underneath it. So isn't there a myth about where we are actually putting these solar farms?
Minister.
Well, I'm not sure it's a myth. I think it's a mixed bag. I mean, there are areas where solar has been deployed very effectively with happy sheep grazing around it and very little reduction to productive capacity of land. Equally, there are, and I've seen, and I don't want to stray beyond my brief, Mr Paisley, I'm not the Energy Minister, but there are in my part of the world in the East some proposals for huge industrial-scale solar on good productive farmland, which I think is something that a lot of people are really worried about in the spirit of the question the Honourable Member for Strangford raised. Lastly, I'm
Kerry McCarthy.
I just wanted to clarify, I was actually asking about onshore wind and not the solar issue. I think with the solar issue, there is that question of how the government classifies BMV land. I totally agree with the Honourable Member for Strangford that genuine BMV land shouldn't be used for anything other than growing food. But I was asking about onshore wind, and of course that's not always about putting it on farmland. There's lots of other potential sites for it.
Minister.
Yeah, no, she makes a very important point, and I mean, in some ways the two are linked because there are plenty of examples of deployment of solar and wind onshore which don't undermine productive capacity of land or, in fact, undermine the attractiveness of the area. And opinion polls show that properly deployed in the right areas with the right consultation and consent, it can be popular. And I know my honourable friend, the Climate Minister, is looking at whether there's more we can do to tackle this short-term energy crisis in a way that doesn't create a problem for us downstream. I think, Mr Paisley, I should wrap up. I've strayed beyond my core brief as the Minister for Science, Research and Innovation. But let me just close by giving all those watching this debate around the country a very, very clear reassurance that the Prime Minister, the Cabinet, the Government, the Secretary of State and the Energy Minister have taken us back to the position that I was proud was in our 2019 manifesto. It's an effective moratorium on fracking, and we have made very clear that ministers are not looking to open up this area to support the crisis in our energy sector. And I hope that message can go forth loud and clear around the country to those who were understandably worried back in September. They need not worry about that, at least, anymore.
Thank you, Minister. I will